Hey everybody, it's me, theubermormon, and today I have a very fast video for you. I hope. Today I'm talking about how to avoid ideology and how to stop yourself from joining another cult after leaving a cult. Okay, so I'm going to talk about... So this is something that I did on accident within the first year of leaving Mormonism. I was very angry. And I was writing up a list of all the reasons why I didn't think the Book of Mormon was true anymore, and why I didn't want to be in the church anymore, and why I thought that Joseph Smith was lying. And I came up with this whole list. And then I was looking over it, and I was just trying to make a really good list. Maybe I would give it to somebody. Maybe my parents were being inquisitive. And so I thought maybe I'll just give this to them one day if they keep asking questions. And I quickly realized as I zoomed out and I worked on that list that this list is only useful to people who have the same epistemology as me. If they don't value science in the same way that I do, then this won't resonate with them at all. It's just a list of history, essentially, that I think is more valid than the history that they think is valid, right? So we come up to like an epistemological crossroads, and it doesn't actually solve anything. And so I thought, what if I could zoom out one more layer and decide the reasons why these reasons are valid to me? So it's like the reasons why I left the church. That's what it is, right? Because I couldn't think of a very good name for them. I just started referring to them as my meta rules, and I thought I would expand on them if I ever needed to. I would condense them if I ever needed to. This would be a very living list. You could call it that. But these are the reasons why I left the church. And these are the reasons that dictated the reasons why I left the church. I really hope that this makes sense. So today I'm going to read them to you. It's a very short list. Okay, and like I said, I've constantly been kind of like condensing and sharpening this list because I want it to be as concise as possible. I think it's a tragedy, just kind of on a tangent now. I think it's a tragedy that I'm in school. I'm working full time, but I'm also in school, and so like I get essays a lot, and very often the goal of the essay is to reach a certain word count or a page number. And I think that's sad because if you could really, really write well, and if the teachers really wanted us to learn how to write well, I feel like they should be asking us to make our argument as short as possible. Like, the shorter, the better. As many words as you can drop, the better. Because it comes across as a smoother read and makes more sense. I don't remember who said this, but he who writes well thinks clearly. Something like that. So anyway, to my rules, the meta rules. I should put some music there, but maybe it would be worse if I didn't, so maybe I won't. Okay, rule number 1. I decide what I can and can't study. Period, end of story. If I'm ever in an organization that tells me that certain topics or certain pieces of information or certain books are off limits and that I should not read them, I should question the intentions of the person who is telling me that. So that's rule number 1. I decide what I study. And along with that goes kind of I'm allowed to choose what I think about. There's this kind of thought crime thing that happens in Mormonism that I remember when I was first leaving the church and kind of not leaving physically, but kind of leaving mentally, kind of working through all of that tension, kind of undoing all those knots in my brain. And I would have a thought, like the voice in my head, like what you call a conscience, or what I used to refer to as the Holy Ghost or something like that, would say something like, what if this is all fake? What if there's not even a God? And that was like just a thing bubbling up out of me. That wasn't me thinking that intentionally. That was just a thought happening in my brain. And I would think that, and I would be like, whoa. And then immediately my brain would go like, I'm sorry, God, I didn't really think that. Please forgive me. Like the conditioning happened, right? So there was a bubble of just like pure intuition or pure like me. And then this other voice would attack it and say, you're not allowed to think that. And Mormonism taught me to do that. And so this goes right along with what you can and can't study is what you can and can't think. So I decide what I can and can't study. That's rule 1 for me. Rule number 2, I am in charge of what I can and can't say. The best way I can describe this one, because it is very clear, but I'll add a little story because why not? My dad was trying to kind of empathize with me. And so he had been listening to a podcast. It's called like Church is True or something. It's in like Apple Podcasts or whatever. It's called Church is True. And then it's like a green box with like flowers or something on it. I don't remember that well. But he sent that to me and he said, I've been listening to this because the guy who recorded this podcast was essentially questioning his faith, went down all the rabbit holes, all the truth claims, all the things that you'll find in the like gospel topics essays, and then decided to remain faithful and started a podcast about it. There are like 8 episodes. And he listened to it because it was a guy who had been in my position who my dad felt could maybe explain where I was coming from in a less angry way at that time. I listened to a couple episodes of it. And what struck me in like episode 2 or 3, I really don't remember that well. He said something like, you know that I'm being honest because there's a good chance that I could get in trouble for saying some of this stuff. Like, I haven't cleared this with my stake president, but I have told him that I'm doing it and I sent him my episodes. So he said, there is a chance that I could get in trouble for this. And my dad told me that. He said, this guy's being so honest. Listen to what he said. And that's when I came up with this rule. I said, yeah, but why is it somebody else's job to dictate what he's allowed to say or not? Doesn't that strike you as a red flag? Would you join another organization that did that? And so that's where this comes from. And the same goes nowadays for like political correctness. There are words nowadays that are off limits. And some of those I agree with, and so I don't say them. But some of them I think are stupid, and so I say them anyways. I really think as long as it's me who's deciding that I can or can't say those things, then I'm fine. As long as I let other people start to dictate the words that are coming out of my mouth, then that's a problem for me. And that's one of the other reasons why I couldn't be Mormon anymore. If you caught the whole like words coming out of my mouth thing, then, extra points for you. Okay. So rule number 3 is the last rule, and it's very simple. And I could almost get rid of half of it, but it feels necessary to me because it's very similar to rule 1, but it's different enough that I want to keep it there for now. Rule 3 is I can question any people and I can question any information. That's rule number 3. So those are my rules. These rules actually resonate with my family who's still active, just not about the church, if that makes sense. So these are rules where I actually feel like I'm being consistent in my worldview, because not only would I not join a religion that does this, I also wouldn't join a political organization that does stuff like this. And, a lot of my close family who are still very active actually agree with this as far as like joining a political ideology goes. They just think that essentially they do a logical fallacy called special pleading when it comes to the church and these rules. But anyway, so those are my meta rules. Those are quite literally the reasons why I left the church. And I will get into, so there are 2 kind of directions that I want to go from this video, but I'm not going to do them today. I have a list of more rules that I wrote for myself. And I want to talk about this for a second, because if you've watched my atheism and theism video, which if you haven't, that feels like a necessary prerequisite to all of my shit. I think that video does a good enough job of explaining where I'm trying to come from that if you haven't watched it, go watch it, please, because I think it puts you in a better space to see where I'm coming from with the rest of this. what I do in that video, and what I'll shortly do now, is give a definition of what I think enlightenment means and how a person can achieve enlightenment. And in very short words, I would say this: as you can take implicit rules and turn them into explicit rules, so essentially something that you're following out of more of a behavioral thing without knowing the reason why, if you can dictate the reason why, if you can prescribe the reason why a certain action is now good for you, then that's enlightenment. Doing that to as many things in your life as you can, the more enlightened you become. And that's not an enlightenment across the board type of thing. That's a very personal, you are knowing yourself better when you describe to yourself why things are good for you and why things are bad for you. And so that's important here. So I think even if you agree with my rules in this video and videos to come, any rules across the board, even if you agree with the 10 commandments, it's better for you to write them for yourself in your own voice, because then it's you defining things for you. I'm probably over-explaining this, but I think that's important. So that's the first thing that I want to do, kind of going from this video. The other thing that I might do one day, but I might not, is just go into like more of the specifics of what actually, like, the chain of events that caused me to leave. Because like I said at the beginning of this video, I wrote this when I was writing all the reasons that I left, and then realizing that the bias that I had at the time was the reason that this new epistemology made sense to me. And so if I was going to present this to somebody who had a different epistemology than I did, then I would be stuck up a river without a paddle, because we would be speaking in different languages to one another. And so I had to zoom out yet again. And I'm glad that I had that presence of mind at the time, because I think that it's made me more secure in my reason for having left. But there's no right way to do it. And so if you didn't do that, or if your rules are different than mine, that's great, because they should be a little different than mine, at least a little. So those are the two directions that I might go because of this video. Like I said, I was going to try and keep this one short, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you for watching. If you have any topics that you want me to go over, if you have specific questions, then cool. Send them to me in the comments. A lot of my videos have my email at the bottom in the description. If this one doesn't, or if any of them don't, it's just theubermormon@gmail.com. Last thing that I will say here is, this channel is not a here's why the church is wrong channel. And the reason for that is there are already a lot of much more popular channels that are doing all of the truth claim stuff. And so honestly, if you want that type of content, there are better people to give that to you. This is how I managed to stay happy and stay optimistic and not become a nihilist after leaving something that told me that the only other option was pessimism and nihilism and outer darkness, essentially. So that's what the point of this channel is. So if you have topics that you'd like me to cover along those lines, then please send them to me. I think that's everything that I want to say. Have a good day, everybody, and go out there and be your best self or something.